Hello and welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, and for today's episode, I'm going to be sharing a recording of a seminar that I just recently did. Typically, I like to hold live seminars once per month where people can come on, get key info and special action steps on a specific health topic, all while getting their personal questions answered too. Now, when I share these seminars on the podcast, I will also tag and drop a link in the show notes so you can gain access to those key presentations and slides that go with it. These slides are a great way to walk through the verbal aspect, and it will also give you, the listener, more clarity on how you can apply the information for yourself. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in. There we go. So welcome to the Decreasing Inflammation and Bloating in Your Stomach seminar. To those of you who are going to be watching this recording, because I'm going to be sending it out live, if you have any questions, feel free to email me back at the same email that you get this video. And for those of you who are in live attendance, welcome. Super pumped to talk with you about decreasing inflammation and bloating. So if you guys and gals have any questions during the seminar, either feel free to drop them in the chat as you go along, or you can save them for the end. Doesn't really matter when you're dropping the question. Just drop it in the chat. That way I can make sure, of course, to
No, I can hear him.
questions. So Cindy, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. So excellent. I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll make sure that, of course, we get on the way here. And as people join us, they can hop in. So all right. You're here, and we will go to presentation. There we go. All right, perfect. So you guys should be seeing this in full screen. So like I said, we're going to be talking about decreasing inflammation and bloating in your stomach today. So for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, I am Coach Andrew, the hormone helper, essentially at Fit for All Fitness. So I am a registered nutritionist, certified dietitian, and of course, certified personal trainer as well. And our company focuses on balancing hormones, but most importantly, helping fix people's guts. And bloating and inflammation and having issues with your stomach is something that we are seeing pretty regularly at this point now. So with that, I want to do this education and hopefully help you guys to get some tangible action steps and tools today on how you can start decreasing inflammation and bloating in your stomach. So in terms of the contents of today's seminar, we're going to be going through symptoms, so everything that you're experiencing on the day-to-day, to help you really define whether or not inflammation in your stomach or bloating is something you have. We'll talk about bloating and IBS, or the inflammatory bowel syndrome, and what actual inflammation means. And then we're going to go through the different types at which someone would experience this. So mechanical versus hormonal. We'll walk through the main cause, so what causes these issues to occur. And then, of course, I'd like to go into those action steps about what you can do it today. Although we have a Q&A at the end, like I said, if you guys have any questions along the way, I do have the chat open to make sure, of course, that you guys are getting your questions answered individually. So I want to start with my own experience when it comes to having stomach issues and gut issues. And you know that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I like to say a feeling is worth 1,000 words. So that is essentially me at the same weight, literally 2 weeks apart. So for those of you who don't know my challenge hormonally, I've had a lot of hormone issues in the past, and bloating and severe digestive issues was something that I struggled for about 3.5 years prior to me becoming a coach. It would start off the same every single day. I would wake up, and on that left-hand side, 6 a.m. workout, my stomach was flat. It was not distended. I had no pressure, and it was great. And then by the time it hit that 8:30 or 9:30 at night, I was bloated to twice the size. I couldn't hold my stomach in anymore. And that came with a lot of onset issues. That came with inconsistent stools, sometimes blood in my stools, having diarrhea, to then having constipation. There were random trigger foods that I was having issues with. And then I was feeling chronically exhausted all the time. When your stomach is battling itself, it's really hard, of course, for you to actually focus on the recovery and healing. So although I was in really great shape and eating really clean food, I was still bloated like a turtle at the end of the day. So bloating or having digestive issues doesn't matter if you're male or female. Both people have it. My wife struggled with bloating for a really long time as well too. So you're not a special fish or someone who's immune to having these issues. Anybody can get it, and anybody can have digestive issues at any time. I actually took this photo on the right hand side 2 weeks before I had my endoscopy, because my stomach was so bloated that they actually had thought that something had perforated one of my bowels, and like there was actual stuff inside. So and of course, like anything, they did an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, and they found nothing, which is what typical people will find with bloating with inflammation. Like me, a lot of our clients have gone through the same issue. So these are only a few of them. At this point, we've coached about 2,800 people. And through this process, you can see bloating or inflammation looks different for different people. It's not always distended stomachs. Sometimes it's your tummy feeling full or bigger than usual. It could be pain and tightness where when you're eating, it's really hard for you to swallow food or keep it down. It could be that random foods trigger you. Maybe today gluten is it. Maybe the next day you have a piece of bread and there's no issue whatsoever. Could be that you're getting bad gas, or your stools and your bowel movements are really consistent or inconsistent. Could be the fact that maybe you're feeling chronically exhausted all the time and that makes you feel super weak, or you're having a large change in your digestive and bowel habits. So maybe you were able to tolerate spicy foods before, and now spicy foods are going through you quicker than they went in you. There's a lot of different things, but bottom line is these are a lot of the symptoms that go in to having poor digestion. A lot of it is, of course, visual or physical, where you're going to feel your stomach fully extend, or you're going to say, well, I was flat in the morning and then all of a sudden I'm 3 times the size, or I have to unbutton my pants. That's only the physical part of it. In terms of what you'll feel from the hormonal side is you might feel that your periods are very inconsistent. You might feel that you've gone from going to the washroom twice a day to now you're going once a day, or maybe once a week, like some of our clients are going. And a little fun fact for you, you should be going to the washroom at least 3 times a day. Twice a day is actually considered constipated. So if you're not going to the washroom regularly, that's a good indicator for you that you could be having some digestive or some IBS issues. So it manifests itself in a lot of different forms. But the reality is bloating, digestion, having stomach issues is present amongst everybody. So I want to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about this blanket label of IBS, and then I actually want to talk about the bloating itself. IBS is this general term that doctors or practitioners will put over it, and even the actual general definition is pretty much the same. It's really vague. So IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, and it's a common condition that affects the digestive system. It causes symptoms like stomach cramps, bloating, diarrhea, and constipation, and it tends to come and go over time, but can last for days, weeks, or months at a time. Usually it's a lifelong problem. That is the actual medical definition of IBS. Basically, it's a blanket term that a practitioner will diagnose you with when they cannot pinpoint the issue. So if they can't specifically say your stomach is the problem, or your intestines are the problem, or you have an inability or a bacterial problem to digest food, they're going to diagnose you with IBS. So, fun fact, I've been diagnosed with IBS, and a lot of my family members have been diagnosed with IBS. No, it's not something that can be passed or something that you're born with. All IBS means is that you have irritable bowels. That's what the IB stands for. It doesn't say why, it doesn't say how, and it also doesn't come with a treatment plan, because there is no treatment, because they don't know what's wrong with you. So, long story short is, it's your doctor telling you to live with it. You have a little bit of IBS, and that's fine. But the reality is IBS actually occurs due to chronic inflammation over time. So your stomach's slow inability over time to not digest food, to stop processing nutrients, to then get your large intestine inflamed, and now you have inflammation all over your gut tract. IBS gets worse over time, and that's because when inflammation is chronic, it can literally stay. If you had a food that was inflammatory to you on Monday, it could stay for up to 4 days in your system. So this is why it's really hard sometimes for people to pinpoint what's causing the IBS, because inflammation will stay there, and that inflammation could be brand new inflammation, could be the inflammation from your breakfast, or it could be old inflammation, which was what you ate 3 or 4 days ago. Now, there's actually 3 types of IBS. So you have IBS-C, IBS-D, and IBS-M. All that means is constipated, diuretic, or mixed. So whenever they diagnose someone with this, it basically means, hey, we're not sure what's wrong with your digestion, so we're going to diagnose you with IBS, and you've been telling me that you're very constipated, so you're going to get IBS-C. Now, with that, they're probably going to give you some type of a laxative, or they're going to encourage you to eat fiber, but they don't really talk about how you remove the inflammation so you can stop the stomach cramps, the bloating, the diarrhea, and the constipation. So now that is where the big part of it comes in, which is the bloating piece. What is bloating? Bloating is the major symptom when it comes to stomach distress. And a lot of people don't actually realize that they're bloated because they're used to being distended for so long. But basically, bloating is when your stomach begins to feel distended beyond your stomach muscles' ability to keep your stomach in and beyond your stomach's ability to digest. So from a bloated perspective, it commonly happens due to gas that is trapped. So when we have gas that is essentially sitting in a specific area, and we'll go through the 2 types of bloating, gas that's sitting doesn't have any freedom of movement, and that's what ends up pushing out your stomach. There's a lot of people who actually mistake their stomach for being bloated after pregnancy or weight gain. So they just think that because their pants are tight, that they're bloated. Not all things that are regards to pant size or physical size means that you're bloated. Bloating comes internally from the stomach and is only digestive tract only. So you won't feel bloated in your chest. You also won't feel bloated in your glutes or your cheeks. You're going to feel bloated only around your lower abdomen area because that's where your stomach is going to live. Now, it can also happen from abdominal wall looseness. So just like core strength is really important, there are sometimes people have stomach issues and their core muscles are weak and they become prone to bloating or mechanical bloating because their stomach starts to push out. One thing that I will say is this: regardless of what type of bloating you have, bloating is not something that goes away on its own. So whether you have mechanical bloating or hormonal bloating, like I'll explain in a second, it's something that you have to actually address the causes for. It's not just going to disappear. Inflammation doesn't disappear. You have to actively get rid of it. So let's start with the mechanical bloating. I'm going to spend a lot of time in our session today talking about hormonal bloating because mechanical bloating is very easy to fix and it's also very easy for you to determine. So I'd say about 20% of our clients have what's called mechanical bloating. So this has to do with the relation of gas. So when we digest food, in a perfect world, we would digest food 100%, and then all of a sudden it would, whatever waste is left or whatever we couldn't digest would get pushed into our intestines, and then it pushes out. But a lot of people's stomachs are very weak. They have very, very low bacteria, or they have a poor microbiome, which is the bacteria that digest the food. And the stomach doesn't actually break down all of the food. So an example of this would be meat. The average piece of meat in your stomach lasts about 4 minutes before it's absolute liquid. Meat is the easiest thing for you to digest. So let's say someone liquefies the meat and that's totally fine. The next thing would be something like a carb. So let's say you have a carb. Carbs are really, really complex. They're difficult for your stomach to break down. So if you were to eat a carb would take about half an hour to 35 minutes to fully break down in your stomach. But let's say the bacteria in your stomach are very weak and they can't break it down. Well, it's going to try its hardest to break down as much as it can, but a lot of it hasn't liquefied, and now it's sitting at the top of that stomach acid. It's just floating there in your stomach. Now, I want you to picture a wine casket for a second. So when you make wine, or if someone knows how to make wine, I won't go into all the wine steps. There's a process in wine called fermenting, in which you let all of the excess pieces of grape, the skin, the peel, the fiber stuff that floats on the top that hasn't been broken down by the juice process, you allow it to ferment, and it creates gases that chemically change the liquid in the wine. Your stomach does the same thing. When you have undigested food that sits in the top and just floats there casually, guess what? It's going to start to ferment. It's going to start to chemically change that liquid, and now gas is going to start to extend. Now, your stomach's got a little flap at the top that if there's a little bit of gas that's coming up early, your stomach can push it out, and you'll have things like exhaling gas through the mouth, or it'll even push gas into the lungs, which is essentially where we get burping from. So for those of you who can burp, you might eat something that maybe throws off your digestion. You burp a couple of times, or maybe you have a couple of drinks, you burp, and then guess what? The gas is gone. But let's say there's way too much gas, or even though you're burping, the gas gets really, really bad. Well, now your stomach's going to try to put gas out the other end, which is where you get your flatulence or your farting from. So let's say now you've got gas coming out both ways, right? Not a pretty picture. But there's still a lot of gas that's building up in your stomach, and you can't get rid of it. And now undigested food is continued to pile up there, and it blocks your ability to burp. This is where mechanical bloating comes from. That gas inflates your stomach and pushes out through your core. You can't control it, and it starts to protrude and make your stomach larger. Now, for mechanical bloating, if you were to wake up in the morning, that gas has had 6 to 8 hours to, of course, process the bloating. So you wake up and you're not bloated. And you have no digestive issues because there's nothing in your stomach and it took 8+ hours to process. But over the span of the day, your bloating gets progressively worse. And it gets to the point where it's hard for you to eat food, or you might lose your hunger because you're super, super bloated. And by the end of the day, you're like a bloated turtle. This is the definition of mechanical bloating. It is very consistent, it's very cyclical, and it has everything to do with your stomach's ability to digest nutrients and the gas that you can't get rid of. So if you have a healthy stomach, you never have any gas because it digests super quick, and all of that food gets pushed out and transported in other places. But if your stomach is weak, and if your digestibility is poor, and if you're not passing stool regularly, then the gas is generated in multiple places, and guess what? It makes its way into your stomach that inflates like a balloon. So mechanical bloating is really common. We see it, like I said, in 20% of our clients, but it's not the only type of bloating or distension or inflammation that exists inside someone's system. This is the big one, hormonal bloating. Hormonal bloating is strictly caused by your body's hormone panel and by two hormones, the hormone estrogen and the hormone cortisol. For those of you who don't know, estrogen manages your daily energy level and your daily fat storage, and cortisol manages your energy usage through the day. So in a healthy gut biome, where it's very healthy. Someone's ovaries or their testicles will signal the body to filter out estrogen through the liver, and then it goes to the gut and it leaves your system. So estrogen that's not used goes into your feces and your poo, and it's supposed to leave. So any hormones that aren't used, most estrogen exits the body. But if you have poor digestibility and that isn't leaving the body regularly, then estrogen is going to sit in the intestine and it's going to make its way into your stomach, and it's going to live there because the stomach is the perfect breeding ground for estrogen. So when estrogen lives inside your stomach, it attacks all of the food and it hijacks it. So then that way it can ride that food and feed off of it. So when we have someone who has high levels of estrogen or who has high levels of cortisol, what happens is that starts to set off their stomach. It starts to attack their food in their digestive tract, and they start to get that chemical reaction that creates a bloating, discomfort, cramps, inconsistent stools, because your stomach is then going to try to push out whatever it can so it can correct the issue. Hormonal bloating comes at random. Sometimes it might be in the morning. Sometimes you might be bloated in the evening. Sometimes you might have 1 or 2 days where there's no bloating at all. Or you might have weeks on end where your bloating is really bad, and it just so happens to be a week where you're super stressed at work. Regardless of how it comes to pass, hormonal bloating gets significantly worse over time because estrogen will multiply. So when your hormone estrogen multiplies in your stomach, now you're in for the fun stuff. This is where not only are you going to get bloated, but you're going to get random triggers for food, where one day it might be gluten that sets you off, and the next day you eat a piece of bread and you don't have any issues. This is where the chronic inflammation is. Now, when estrogen lives, it doesn't like to leave. So when it multiplies, it's going to continue to multiply, but pass as much as it can anywhere inside your digestive tract. So your intestines get filled with estrogen, your stomach gets filled with estrogen, your esophagus gets filled with estrogen, making it easier for acid reflux. Now, all of a sudden, not only do you have bloating and you've got all these hormonal issues, but your digestive system is now at impact as well. So this is the difference between mechanical and hormonal bloating. Now, in terms of the two, this is what I want you to take away with what I just said. From a mechanical perspective, mechanical is very consistent with when it occurs. Very consistent. You start off like not bloated at all in the morning, and then as you go through the entire day, it's going to build and it's going to get worse until you're as bloated as you'll ever feel at the end of the evening. Mechanical bloating is a big indicator of poor digestion. So it is your stomach is not digesting the nutrients properly, and it comes down to a progresses of inflammation over time. So your stomach is really inflamed and it's going to get worse. Now, the more difficult the foods are to break down, the more complex they are. So your healthy fats, your carbs, the worse the bloating is going to be because your stomach is going to have a harder time breaking it down. Gluten and dairy being the main two. So if you have mechanical bloating, that's an easy fix. You need to work on your gut health. That's it. You need to work on the gut bacteria, and that's going to be an easy fix. Now, the hormonal side of it. Hormonal can come at any time. It's going to come when the hormones are at its highest. And because it's hormone-based, it also means that it triggers with stress because cortisol makes more estrogen. So if you have a high stress lifestyle and you're living a high stress routine, combined with the fact that maybe there's some estrogen already living in your stomach, you're going to have random IBS issues. Now, Hormonal shows up with chronic fatigue and it shows up with slow thyroid issues. And this is where the majority of the people are going to get that nonsense IBS diagnosis from their practitioners. Their practitioners can't pinpoint, is it the estrogen? Is it their thyroid? Oh, there we go. Is it the estrogen? Is it their thyroid? Is it something else? Because there's no pinpoint, then of course, they're just going to say, hey, you have IBS. And it's not food dependent, but more stomach dependent with the estrogen. So doesn't matter what food, you might have random foods that trigger you, and then you try in the week afterwards, and all of a sudden it's totally fine. I want to spend more on the hormonal piece because the hormonal piece is going to come down to the estrogen part of it. The main cause of 95% of all of the digestive issues that people experience out there is estrogen. When estrogen lives in your stomach, it attacks your food, it attacks the lining, and it makes it hard for you to process nutrients. It attacks the bacteria. And when the bacteria in your stomach start to die, you have what's called a biome of bacteria in your stomach. You have some good bacteria, some bad bacteria. The good bacteria eat food and they give you nutrients in return. The bad bacteria are supposed to attack and kill foreign chemicals and particles. If you have an attack of the bacteria and estrogen will attack all of your good bacteria, now the only thing you have in your stomach is attacking germs. And guess what attacking germs do? They attack everything in sight. They're going to attack your stomach. They're going to attack your intestines. And this is where all your cramping issues are going to come from. Estrogen is ultimately going to change your metabolism, because if you have an overabundance of estrogen that sits in your stomach, your cortisol is going to change. It's going to slow down your thyroid, which then slows down the speed at which you digest and process nutrients. And then this is going to lead to also weight gain. It's going to lead to poor digestibility and temperature issues. And estrogen is terrible because it self-multiplies. Estrogen is the only hormone that doesn't need another hormone to create itself. It's just going to continue to multiply and multiply until you deal with it. So estrogen is the main cause, and it's because it feeds off of energy. So when we bring food into the stomach, we're giving energy right there. It's the energy source is your stomach. So if estrogen uses energy and feeds off of energy and gives your body energy, that's where it's going to live, thrive, and where it's going to over succeed, which is where the issues are. Now, estrogen alters your digestion in 3 really specific ways. And it's not the same for each person, but each person is going to have one specific issue when it comes to estrogen. So a lot of the times, your body will get really good at processing estrogen. But that being said, the way your body processes estrogen is different. So it alters the first way, which is a blocker. So estrogen that sits inside your stomach will actually block your body's ability to digest nutrients, and it'll also block your ability to produce and create new hormones. So if you were to think of nutrients floating around in your stomach like cars, and these cars have a driver and a passenger, the driver and the passenger can't get to where they need to go because estrogen says, I'm going to block the road. I'm going to stop. And unless you pick me up and drive me where I want to go, you're not going anywhere. It's a blocker. So it prevents your body from making other hormones, which starts affecting your metabolism, and it blocks your body from digesting nutrients properly. The second way it acts is like a dam. When your body tries to deal with estrogen, the simplest way it might do that is put up a dam and try to hold estrogen back from attacking your stomach. This tends to happen with the people who suffer with a lot of really, really loose stools or diarrhea, or they float from diarrhea to being really constipated. The way the body will block estrogen as a dam is it's going to try to stop it in your intestinal system. So That's where estrogen has to leave your body. Remember the excess estrogen. So it's easiest to dam it there, to try to proactively push out stools before they even form, right? I don't even care if it's diarrhea, push it out because I'm trying to hold the estrogen back. And the last way that it stomach altering is the hijacker. So estrogen has the ability to actually turn itself into other hormones and to block areas that your hormones would be absorbed. So we have these little things around our body, especially around our neck and around our inner groin, close to our stomach, called lymph nodes. These lymph nodes are responsible for bringing nutrients and hormones in, but estrogen will hijack these lymph nodes and it will close those ports off. So now the only thing that can get around and get in is estrogen. Estrogen is incredibly dangerous because while making these changes, it gets progressively worse over time. So regardless of whether it's a blocker, a dam, or a hijacker, your body is trying to deal with it in a specific way. And these are the ways that it's going to alter your digestion. So where can we find estrogen? Sure, our body will make a little bit of estrogen, but the body's estrogen that we make is actually not the problem. If you have a normal amount of estrogen floating in your body, in your bloodstream, your body can deal with it easily. That's because it's designed to deal with it, because it knows how much you are making every single day. The issue with estrogen and how estrogen starts to make its way into our system is because there are different ways that estrogen is made and introduced into our system. So of course, our ovaries or our testicles makes estrogen, but our adrenal glands also make estrogen. So when we are incredibly stressed, we create estrogen for more energy, because remember, estrogen is responsible for managing energy. Now, estrogen is also created from adipose tissue. Adipose tissue means fat tissue. So the higher someone's body fat percentage that they have, the more estrogen you are going to have. So those are a lot of ways that the body can make estrogen and overcreate estrogen. So stress and having high levels of body fat. Now, there's ways that we put on our body. So for example, contraceptives or different types of hormone therapy. So chemicals that we choose to put in our body. Many women get put on birth control, not knowing that it's estrogenic and it screws up your system. Many men get put on HCG injections or might be on testosterone replacement if they're older, not knowing what the consequence of the estrogen is going to be. And then, of course, there's the chemicals that we put onto our body. Deodorants, there's body sprays, there's perfumes, there's soaps, and then there's plastics. So the plastic that your food comes in, the plastic container that you warm your food up in, all of those things contribute in very, very minuscule amounts, small little bits of estrogen into your system every day. The final form of estrogen is called phytoestrogens. There's actually foods that act as estrogen and help estrogen produce in your system. So if your body is making its normal estrogen, that's fine. But then you're stressed and you get more estrogen. You're stressed, so you gain weight. So because you're at a higher body fat percentage, you make more estrogen. Now you have double the estrogen you had. Then you might be on a certain medication, contraceptive or replacement, that creates more estrogen daily. Then you're cooking with plastics, you're drinking out of plastic BPA water bottles, and you're putting chemicals onto your body like deodorant, which are estrogenic. Plus, you're eating foods that have estrogen in them. This is where all of the digestive issues come from. Notice how as kids, when we're really young, 7, 8, 9, 10, we have no digestive problems. As a matter of fact, we all know that in our teen years, We could eat pretty much everything short of a human being, and we were good. We never had any digestive issues. We were always hungry and we were always fine. This estrogen problem develops over time. As you get older and your stomach gets worse, as you get older and your body has an inability to help you filter out the estrogen, now you start having these problems. And through the hormone reboot program, we're seeing people who are having these issues as low as 22 and 23 now. Whereas 5 years ago, I would only see this with clients who were 35 and 40 and up. So this estrogen is becoming worse and worse, and it's progressing into our system to the point where we can't digest it anymore. So what the heck do we do about it? What are we going to do today to make sure that, of course, we can reduce the estrogen, but start healing some of the issues that we're having, like the bloating, the abdominal cramping, and the inability to digest stuff? Because ultimately, bloating aside, we've got to work on the nutrient absorption in order to fix the hormones. So here's what we can do about this. With this, if you want to write down the action steps, you totally can. If you want the slide deck at the end of this, that's totally fine. I'll drop the link for the slide deck too. So don't worry too much about it. Just focus on listening in. So first tip, we got to start by cleaning the gut up. So regardless of whether you have mechanical or hormonal as your issue, you've got to remove inflammatory foods from your diet so your gut can start to heal. If your stomach needs to do the absorption and the filtering in order to pass stool out, then you have to heal it. And yes, this means sometimes taking out foods that we like if they're causing us issues. So here's my recommendation for this action step. You want to start with one food group at a time. So if I'm going to focus on dairy, then dairy is going to be the thing that I pull out, and it's going to be dairy in all forms. And now take notes on how you feel before and after. You can also do this with a specific food item at a time. So let's say if it's bagels, or let's say if it's a specific vegetable that sets you off, remove it from your diet, keep it away for about a week. That passes the 4-day window of inflammation, and then retest a single item at a time. Put one food item at a time. So if you've removed all dairy, start with cheese. Put cheese back into your routine, and then say to yourself, am I bloated? Am I having digestive issues? Am I having flatulence or burping a lot, which is an indicator of gas and the inability to absorb? Did my stool change? Ask yourself this question. My recommendation for you guys and gals is to start with difficult digesting foods: gluten, dairy, and nuts. It's not that these things are bad for you. And I will stress this. I will stress this so much. It's not that these things are bad for you. It's that they're super, super difficult to digest. Of course, let me put an of course beside this, everything in moderation. But gluten, dairy, and nuts, I have nuts all the time. I have at least a quarter cup of almonds every single day. Nuts are fine because my digestion is fine now. But these are some of the most hardest things to break down in your body. They're very complex. They take 30 to 40 minutes to break down for a single serving. So if you're eating multiple servings of this, you might be giving your stomach a hard time. So start with this stuff first, remove it, and see if your inflammation goes away, and see if your bloating goes away. If it does, then it's very easy that, hey, guess what? The issue is mechanical, and that's what you need to work on. Your second tip, remove chemicals from your routine. So estrogen and weak phytoestrogens. So this is an estrogen that's so weak, it just kind of floats around in your bloodstream. Estrogens lie in everything from what you put on your body to what you put in it. So what I want you to do is today, look at your makeup, your deodorants, your cologne, your aftershave, and your body washes. What you want to see is you want to see BPA free, you want to see hormone free, and you want to see organic and all natural. If you guys have questions on specific brands, I never put specific brands out there because we're not affiliated with anybody. But if you have questions individually, just send me an email and I can let you know if, in terms of the ingredients, if it's really solid. I don't like to favor different brands, but look at this. So ideally, you want to get them in natural forms. Natural forms means that they won't last long. And that is a good indicator to you that it is not going to last long in your body. So if you have a deodorant, the deodorant lasts 48 hours, like some of these crazy ones for men. 48 hours, if you reapply every single day, those chemicals are staying in your body over and over again, which is a big issue. Next, don't heat up or reheat food in plastics. This is big. Get glass containers. As a matter of fact, they're going to be cheaper in the long run because they're more reusable. And you can, of course, heat it in. And the same thing with your water bottles. Keep your water bottles BPA free and don't drink those plastic cheapy Kirkland bottles of water where you leave it in the sun for half an hour and now all of that chemical BPA and estrogen is floating inside of it. Last one, when we're washing laundry, make sure your laundry is organic and chemical free. A lot of people like to use different scents or different not fast dry. What is it? No wrinkle. There you go. No wrinkle chemicals, and they have phytoestrogens in them as well too. So that being said, if you're doing a lot of these overhauls for these first two tips, you're going to say to yourself, okay, this is a lot of change. I'm going to look at all these different types of things. How much is this actually going to affect me? Is a big one. So on average, people carry about 1.4 to 1.7 pounds of chemicals floating in their bloodstream. And of that, about 80% of them are estrogenic. So does it make a big difference? Yes. Will it make a big difference over time? Absolutely. If you make these changes today, 3 to 4 months from now, your digestion is going to be significantly better. Now you're going to say, well, why 3 to 4 months? If you've been using chemicals for your entire life, it's going to take time to filter out through your bloodstream. So give it a little bit of time, but these are really, really simple fixes that you can do to improve over that span. Your third tip, estrogen. Estrogen is the big one. So focus on balancing the estrogen. Estrogen and testosterone, they're always fighting for dominance. When one is high, the other one is lower. That's it. So what do we want to do? We want to give testosterone that fighting chance to dominate so it can keep your estrogen at a realistic level. So these 3 nutrients for you, zinc, magnesium, and potassium. Keep them in your diet. This is more lean red meat because the zinc helps create testosterone, magnesium helps filter out older hormones, and potassium is responsible for improving digestion. So if you're going to take some supplements, or if you're going to focus on this, make sure you're taking your high protein in, that it's some lean meat, and that you're getting your zinc, magnesium, and your potassium in. Now, with focusing on balancing estrogen, drop fatty beef. Fatty beef or fatty meats, the fat part is where essentially the estrogen count is when it comes to food. The same thing with tofu or lentils. So if you're someone who has really, really excessively high levels of estrogen in your body, you have to drop these things. Again, not that these foods are bad. They're not. You know, everyone, I should say, should address this on an individual basis. So if you have questions, shoot me over an email. But with this, if you have excessively high estrogen, this isn't helping. Having fatty beef will keep your estrogen profile high, and consuming tofu or lentils will also keep your estrogen profile high as well too. So for the 4th tip, talked a lot about removing. Let's talk about what we can put in to heal your biome and your gut health in your bacteria. So these are foods that are healthy for your gut. The top ones are what are called prebiotic, and the bottom ones are probiotic. So there's a difference between the two. Prebiotics are responsible for essentially promoting and multiplying the gut bacteria, And probiotics are responsible for helping you break down the food and the digestion. You need both in your system. So from a probiotic, you've got yogurt, sauerkraut, kombucha, and tempeh. They are really, really great sources of probiotic. And if you had one serving of these 2 to 3 times a week, you would see a significantly better digestion profile, and you'll find that your stool frequency will improve as well too. So remember, if you're going less than twice a day, and even then, like, I would say you need to be going at least 3 times a day, because that is regular in my opinion. Where if you're eating lunch, breakfast leaves. If you eat dinner, lunch leaves. That's the way that your digestion should go, because it means that it's consistent, but at the very least, twice a day. So for probiotics, yogurt, sauerkraut, kombucha, and tempeh. For your prebiotics, kimchi, pickles. Pickles are a great source of this. Pickles, not cucumbers, strangely. Kefir and miso. So you can have these daily, besides taking a pre and probiotic. Like if you're like, hey, I'm not going to take these foods, then have a pre or probiotic. I know Clean Basics, a company called Clean Basics, has a really solid pre and probiotic that's built into one. But if you're going to use the food bases, then start to implement these foods in. So those are the 4 tips in terms of healing your gut. Before we go into the Q&A time, everything that I talked about, from the healing the digestion to making sure that your gut protocol is stable and that your hormones are balanced, this is something that we do with our hormone reboot program. It's an 8-week program, and it's specifically designed to build out someone's estrogen profile, to make sure that it's low and it's stable, to get digestion starting again. So then that way, of course, you can heal your gut and stop having these bloating issues and these IBS issues. With this, there's a link that I'll drop in the chat if you want more info on the program. It has the information there. It has what's involved. It's www.fit4allfitness.com/hormone reboot. So fit4allfitness.com/hormone-reboot. So if you check that out, you'll be able to actually see what's involved in the program. But bottom line, it's about really giving you a nutrition protocol to support your hormones. It's course code modules that are going to teach you how to balance your estrogen and heal your gut. A big part of this is knowing how to maintain this. So of course, we'll walk you through it. And of course, it's access to group coaching calls where you can get that personalized support. So that's what's involved in the program. At this point, I will unshare my screen here. And if you guys or gals have any questions, you can either unmute yourself. I'm happy for you guys to unmute yourself and hear a lovely voice, or you can drop your questions in the chat. So then that way I can support you guys individually if you need. Or you can tell me how well of a job I've done. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll ask a question, Andrew.
Yes, hello.
Yeah. So how do you tell if you have high estrogen? Is it the symptoms that you went through?
So 2 ways. You can check blood work. If you're checking with blood work, a regular, you don't need like a Dutch test or anything fancy. If you go to your practitioner and you check a hormone called estradiol, that is the byproduct of estrogen that lives throughout your system. You can do it that way. Or the other way is for you to go based off of symptoms. So realistically, with estrogen, if your bloating is something that comes and goes and is very, very inconsistent, that is hormonal in nature. Mechanical bloating due to poor digestion, is not an estrogen issue. So if you're removing food and your digestion starts to improve and your bloating is slowly weaning off through the day, Scott, then essentially it's a mechanical issue and you don't even need to worry about estrogen. But if you get blood work, or if you're having and taking a look at these symptoms and you're like, I've got at least 4 of these going on at any given day, there's a very high chance that your estrogen is high. An even easier determinant of estrogen is body fat. So while your stomach is the transport of nutrients for estrogen, your body fat is the storage of estrogen long term. So if you're finding that weight is coming up, or you're having a really hard time from a body fat perspective, and your body fat is all around your main midsection area and your chest, and your arms and limbs are totally fine, that's also an indicator that your estrogen is high too. So hopefully that helps. Great question.
Excellent. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? You guys can either unmute or drop yourself in the chat. And by the way, if you don't want to like target yourself, or like if you want to, you can click just to me in the chat and drop it in as well too. So I'm all than happy to take private questions as well. And I'll still answer it here, but it won't be a disclaimer thing. So there we go. And that makes sense. Okay. So somebody's got a question here. So how does this affect period or metabolic cycles? Okay, not metabolism. So your period cycle. So a lot of women will get bloating during and after their period, which is basically hormonal. It is estrogen related. So when estrogen starts to increase, your bloating will get progressively worse. And then when your period normalizes and your estrogen normalizes, your bloating will disappear. So it's normal for females to experience bloating during their period, but that bloating should only be like a 1 to 2 day window max. And it is also normal for females to experience bloating during the initial stages of menopause. So this is where estrogen is starting to take a really high turn. You'll get that for the first 2 or 3 months, but that's actually something that can be managed with the hormones as well. So great question. Sandra. So Sandra goes, I have hypothyroidism. Can I combine this program with my medication? So yes. So the best part of this is all of our protocols are based off of food. So depending on what medication someone has within their diet or their routine, basically we work around that medication profile, and we can also get recommendations or give recommendations for you depending on what the brand of medication is. So a lot of people don't realize, Sandra, that like sometimes it could be the actual medication itself. That could be like for hypothyroidism, a lot of people take a medication called levothyroxine, and levothyroxine is stupid high in estrogen, and there's actually better brands. So one, this program won't affect medication at all. We can work alongside it to help balance it out. And two, if there's any red flags that we see from a medication perspective, then we can let you know, and you can have that conversation with your doctor, Sandra. So hopefully that helps. Shelly goes, how does this affect a 45-year-old woman, aka me? No worries, that is totally fine. So regardless of age, so bloating is something that progresses over time due to chronic inflammation. So whether someone is 12 years old or they're 45 years old, the only thing that changes with age, Shelly, is your body's ability to filter hormones and your stomach's ability to digest nutrients. So even at best, even if your stomach, Shelly, was perfect, it was 100% efficient, we would still have waste. We never truly have the best efficiency, because if we were able to use everything in our food, nothing would come out the other end. So our stomachs to start aren't even at 100% efficiency, still have waste out the other end. Now, as you get older, your stomach will become less and less efficient to break down food because it's tired. So the older you get, the harder it is for your stomach to digest, which is why you need to work on the estrogen now. If the estrogen is stable and it's controlled, even when you turn 50, 60, 70 years old, with your estrogen being managed, your stomach, even if it's a little tired, can still deal with the hormonal stuff. So how this affects you is essentially if your digestive process is already in a state where you're having bloating and you're having these digestive issues, in another 10 years, this is going to be like, 3 or 4 times worse than this. So you want to make sure that you're dealing especially with the estrogen buildup, because especially at 45, you've got, if you're not already, I don't know your personal situation, you got the potential of menopause kicking in, which could be the big change from an estrogen standpoint. And of course, you're going to have that huge estrogen shift as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Shelley. Great questions. Excellent. I've got another one here. So hang on. I'll address your follow-up, Shelley, first before I answer this private one. That's exactly it. I'm struggling with weight loss and bloating. So bloating and weight loss. So when I say weight loss, fat loss is the big part of it. So when estrogen is high, the vicious cycle of estrogen goes like this. Estrogen manages your energy. Cortisol manages your energy usage, and your stomach manages your digestion. If your digestion is poor and you have an overusage of energy, the body tells you to store more fat. If you store more fat, you have more estrogen. If you have more estrogen, your stomach hurts more. Your stomach hurts more, you use more energy, you store more fat, you have more estrogen, and that cycle continues to snowball. So this is why people will say, you know what, I never used to have any of these digestive problems anymore, but now I'm struggling to digest food. Now my weight is coming up. And that's something that we see alongside a lot of our people who go through the program, Shelley, is people's weight goes hand in hand with their estrogen profile. So when you fix the estrogen doesn't have any place to live, and then the fat starts to shrink and it disappears. Because all fat is just energy. That's it. Body goes, I must need the energy, so let me store it so I can use it for later. So hopefully that's second piece to your weight loss and the bloating. So from the private question, when it comes to PCOS or having cancers. So this person has, and I add cancer into this, but PCOS is another one. So sometimes people have digestive issues due to a system that's not running right. So for example, I've had hormonal issues. I've had to get a testicle removed. That set off a hormone process. Some people have PCOS where their ovaries don't function right. Some people might have surgeries where pieces of their thyroid is removed. And now the amount of hormones that they create is different. So this is why the digestion becomes even more important, because if your hormone profile is different for any reason, whether it's medication, a surgery, or something that your body isn't working, even sometimes a hit to the head. Sometimes people might do a contact sport or something, and now their brain isn't outputting what it needs for the hormones. All of that is going to then affect the way that your body digests. So if you have this specific issue, and it might be worth having a one-on-one conversation privately, because there's a lot of variables to that. But if you're experiencing hyperthyroidism, PCOS, you have a possible cancer, your hormones could already be off from this. So in that case, how have these hormones affected your stomach? How have they affected your gut and your digestive system? Excellent. Great questions, team. I love it. I love it when everybody is engaged. So I've got time for one more question, and then I've got to head off to another call. So I'll leave this here while I say this last piece. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop in the chat or unmute yourself. With the replay, so I will send the replay over tomorrow with the slides as well too. So if there's anything on the slides where you're like, oh, what was that? You can listen to the audio replay. It'll also be on the podcast as well. We have a podcast called the Hormone Helper Podcast. It's literally everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. This stuff from the bloating perspective is just one piece, and there are other things that we talk about from bloating and digestion on the podcast as well. Feel free to check it out. Let me see if I have I don't know if I've got a link for the podcast, but the podcast is just something that people can listen to along the way. And if it helps you, great. If it's something that happens to be relevant to you in the moment and you're like, hey, this makes sense for my hormones and for everything, cool, then awesome. If not, or if you're the type of person that's like, hey, the 8-week reboot might be a good thing for me, then you can check that as well too. So let me drop it in the chat here. There you go. So that's the link. So it's called the Hormone Helper Podcast. And there are tons of episodes. Like I know episode, I believe 36 is on bloating. And then I believe it is episode 28 talking about foods and the digestion too. So there's a few episodes that are there. But other than that, I will end on a timely note, and I appreciate all of you guys and gals for listening in live, for showing up and asking your questions. I appreciate that. And if you have any individual questions, you can feel free to message me individually. Other than that, thank you so much for hopping on, and you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, and we will catch you all later.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site? We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.